Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our digital school Q&A session with Zandria Farrell. Before we begin today's meeting, I just want to acknowledge that this session is being hosted on the traditional lands of the Kaurna peoples, and I recognise their connection to this land and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Indigenous people here today. Just a bit of housekeeping now. My name is Christian and I'm a space communicator at the Australian Space Discovery Centre. Today we're joined by Zandria Farrell to learn about what it has been space sector lead at the Bureau of Meteorology for its space and space weather capability. Zandria's space journey started in 2018 when she joined the Australian Space Agency as the International Engagement Lead, where she was responsible for signing of international arrangements with key space agencies. Prior to her space trajectory, Zandria graduated from Flinders University with honours in archaeology, then completed a graduate diploma of environmental management at the University of South Australia and held progressive roles throughout federal government agencies. So if you have any questions during our chat, please submit them via the Q&A function or ask your teacher to submit one for you. Our session will wrap up at 2:45 p.m. All right, let's get started. It is wonderful to have you with us today, Zandria. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi Christian, thank you very much for having me, and hi to everyone that's tuned in. Great to have you with us to let me tell you about my journey and what I've got to say about space and how I got here. This first slide I think is a nice little summary about me, and not space related, although you will see me in a bit of a zero-G kind of situation, but I'll start from the left. I have a lot of interests. I enjoy painting and art. I've got a nice little couple of raised bed gardens and hoping to get some chickens soon in that chicken house. I really enjoy spending time with my family, going for bushwalks, rides by the beach. We have a large black cat, as you can see in one of those, taking up space in front of our beautiful fire. Pride of place, that one. And although I say this is about me and not as much about my space career, you can see there's a couple little nods to space. The bottom photograph is me at the International Astronautical Congress in Washington in 2019, where I was fortunate enough to go there with the Australian Space Agency as the delegation lead there, and I got to see Buzz and present from the Apollo 11 mission, which was amazing. And there you can see me in one of the photos talking to my children about space weather, because it just comes up in general conversation, and they're looking at the angstroms there of the different lenses of the sun. So space, I'm new. I often say I'm new to space, but when I think about it, it's been a few years now, so maybe it's a part of my everyday thinking. So it's just, yeah, thanks for that.
All right. Oh, thanks, Zandria. It's good to learn a bit more about the personal side of what goes on. It's good to know a bit more about than just what happens in your career. But we might start off with a few questions. And it says that you are a space sector lead. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So within the Bureau of Meteorology, we do a lot of work with weather, obviously, but we also do space weather. So part of the Bureau, there is a space weather capability, and space weather affects a number of different industries. So we have a space sector lead, because space weather affects spacecraft and the space environment. We also have a defence lead to engage with the defence sector. There's also a community and also energy resources and an aviation sector that are all really important in the space weather arena, because if you don't know about it, you don't know how to prepare for it. So as the space sector lead for space and space weather, I engage with the space industry, the Australian Space Agency, to help people understand what the impacts of space weather could be. Sometimes it's actually telling them that space weather exists and what space weather is, but it's a lot of engaging and education and sort of learning about the needs and requirements of the space industry and how alerts and warnings, and products and services to help them best mitigate against space weather.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And I'm wondering, why do you love doing what you do?
Well, I get to do stuff like this, which is really fun. Before my space trajectory, I didn't really know about space weather, and then as I joined the Bureau, space weather became my world, which is slightly ironic, but the more you learn about space weather, the more interesting it is, and it's a topic that's kind of new, even in the space field, and in the physics field. It's probably an emerging science, so people are still trying to work out what things mean, and it's such a complicated and fascinating area to look at, and it touches so many different aspects of our lives, and so I suppose that also leads me to why I like space generally. Space is great with like the solar system and out there, but I love how space technology can help improve our lives here on Earth and help us lead better lives and improve what we're doing down here.
Oh, very good. I'm sure we'll get some interesting space questions off the back of that too. Another question for you. What is your career highlight so far? What do you love doing? What's something that you love doing, or something that you've come across that you're just like, oh, I just love doing that?
I think probably one of my career highlights so far, I'm assuming there's going to be a few more as we carry on. I'm not at retirement age yet, but attending the International Astronautical Congress in Washington was amazing. As I mentioned, I went there as leading the Australian Space Agency delegation. I engaged with Australian industry, state and government territories to get them to come along as well. But being in an international forum where you've got NASA and the European Space Agency, French, German, like the cream of the crop when it comes to very, very experienced space agencies, was fantastic. I got to learn so much and meet so many inspiring people. Heads of agencies were willing just to talk to me, and you could bump into them at different booths. So I think that was a career highlight, just being able to rub shoulders with, I suppose, the space stars, pardon the pun.
That sounds really exciting. It's great that you can freely talk about that with your networking that you have with you. What do you reckon some of the personal attributes and skills that someone might need to help them excel in this space sector lead field?
Sure. Well, I suppose that a lot of people think about space jobs, engineers, rocket science, physics, which is all very, very important aspects to space and the success of the space industry. But I think I show that it's important to have the communication skills. So my background hasn't been in physics, it hasn't been in engineering, but I had excellent written skills, communication skills, the ability to take complex ideas and simplify them. I sometimes describe my role as like a translator. So I talk to the researchers, I talk to our forecasters, and I translate that complex physics jargon, but important jargon, and can translate that into simplified terms so that everyday people can understand the impact of it. So I think if there's anyone that maybe doesn't feel space is for them, I think an important message is space is for everyone. We need space communicators like yourself, Christian, people that can communicate, come up with good ideas, and people that can write really good skills. So at university or even at high school, keeping up that English and humanities elements all will contribute to a very successful space career.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear. And space is for everyone.
Everyone.
Everyone. And it's good to know that you need some skills that you need some language skills that are able to transfer that technical language to everyday language that everyone can understand. So that's really great that that those skills are really needed as well to complement those technical skills. We'd love to hear more about your journey to where you are now. Can you tell us about your path here? We talked about that you've moved through a few agencies and done a few things. Could you maybe tell us more about that path that you've been on?
Sure. And being completely honest, as a kid, I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grow up. Possibly I still don't, but I do know that space is where I want to be. But how you define that, it is still sort of like I'm happy to sort of explore the vastness of space in career-wise. But at school, I loved a broad range of subjects, from art, as you can see in my About Me picture previously, but I did love maths and I love science and languages, and so I did a broad spectrum of studies. And so when I got to the age of going to university, I was told quite clearly by my dad, go to university, whatever you do, just choose something you enjoy and stick to it for 3 years, so then that will open many doors. So I followed that advice. I still didn't really know what I wanted to be, but I thought archaeology is really exciting and interesting. It ticks a lot of boxes in terms of exploration and problem solving and thinking, and learning. And so I decided that archaeology was where I would start my learning journey at that tertiary level. So completed the study there, and then I travelled overseas. I actually became an objects conservator, and so I would look after the objects that came out of an archaeological dig, preserve them, condition check them, and worked quite closely with the museums and doing some really great and interesting work there. And then I realised, I thought I'd like to try something new. You'll probably get a bit of a sense that I like to dabble in a lot of different areas, and I've continued that. And I decided to do a diploma in environmental management because I was quite passionate about looking after the earth, looking after our resources, and really understanding how we can provide for our future. So I did some extra study there, and then I looked at how I could utilise both those the degree and diploma in a career context. And I moved to Canberra and worked for the Department of at the time it was Department of Water, Heritage and the Arts, so the federal government for environment. And I was able to utilise the skills, not specifically on archaeology, but the strategic thinking, my ability to communicate in a number of different areas. So I got policy skills, writing skills in a government sense, which is quite different from an academic sense, and project and program design. So I had a number of different roles within the Department of Environment, which then led me back from Canberra to Adelaide when I started a family, and worked for the Department of Industry, where I was able to support new businesses to get grants in a business management grant program that was running at the time. I then saw the advert for the Australian Space Agency, and I thought, I've got to give this a go. So without a science background, but knowing that I had very good government engagement skills, I gave it a go, and that was where I got introduced to the beautiful world of space, and I was able to learn a lot about space on that broad scale, engaging and helping the agency start up. So when I started at the agency, there was 20 people. Which was amazing because you got to see all aspects, and it was really that entrepreneurial spirit which sort of pushed us to see the agency succeed. And I look now at the Bureau and see how far the agency's come, and it's amazing to imagine that started with just 20 people doing nearly everything. But yeah, so it was quite a winding journey, well, a very winding trajectory that landed me where I am today, because after 2 years at the agency, I wanted to get a bit more focus on a specific subject, and the opportunity, the space weather lead, came up. So with the agency's blessing, moved over there, and fortunately I get to interact with and work quite closely with the agency. So that's one of the great things about the Australian space community, is it is a community. Everyone gets along really well and everyone is very generous with their time. So if you don't know things, like sometimes I don't, actually a lot of the times I don't, you can ask people and people are very happy to share their knowledge, which is great.
That's really good. And it seems like you've been on a great winding journey, and all from that seed that your father planted to go to university and pick something that you enjoy, pick something that you're passionate about, and then you just grew from there.
That's
so you
right.
did archaeology and then went to environmental planning. So there we go. That's environmental management. So that's wonderful. And seeing all that, the journey that you've been on, that's really good. And I'm glad that I'm guessing that the attendees here would really value that too, just listening to your journey.
Yeah.
So talking about that, were you always interested in space, or was it something that developed over time when you were going through uni and then coming to seeing some of these other exciting projects that were happening?
I was interested in space, but not like I'm interested in space now, if that makes sense. I really enjoyed the concept of what was out there and the vastness of space, but I never, because I was always involved in really quite interesting things, I think I was often looking down at the earth with archaeology and environmental management, that it took me to move to the agency to look up again. So it's kind of been a bit of a reawakening of the space and the love of space.
Oh, very good. Was there any moment when you were doing that you realised that this is what you wanted to pursue? Was there any defining moments that you were just like, this is the moment that I'm going to start looking at space more?
I don't know if it was a specific moment. I think when the agency said, yes, we value your skills, I think that was a pretty good moment to say, wow, yeah, I want to do this. No, I can't say that there was a specific moment. I just love learning, and being in this field and being in Australia at this point in time is a really wonderful opportunity to learn and be part of something that is evolving and is growing. So yeah, I think it's an ongoing enjoyment of space.
Lovely. And you've grown so much over the course of your career. What drives you to do what you're doing now? What is that motivating factor? What do you love about what you're doing now? Like, what drives you to do what you're doing?
I think that my motivation is knowing what I help people understand will benefit them. So I'm really, I want to do something that's meaningful, and that can give, that can help other people. So in the space weather sector, the space weather field, even just telling people that it exists and how it can impact their lives or impact their technology, I feel that with that knowledge they can then do good things. So I'd like to enable people to have better knowledge of what's going on around them, and I think that's what motivates me, being able to contribute something that's bigger, and that's really important for us as humanity. So yeah, that's what drives me, I think, a contribution to a bigger picture.
And thinking about that contribution to a bigger picture, what do you imagine the future of space for Australia might look like in 2030?
2030, goodness. The rate of change and the rate of improvement's not the right word that I'm thinking of, but that acceleration of skill and achievements that the Australian space industry are currently happening right now is mind-blowing. We will mature, and some of the things like 5 years ago that were just ideas, companies with 2 people, they're already companies of 30, 40. I can see that trajectory going up, and we have really big players in some of the key sectors, such as like space flight and space launch. We're going to be a really big player there, and even in some of the ability to support international missions. Australia, as you know, we have a geographical advantage. We've got quiet skies and big landmass. So seeing Australia participate in international missions with our infrastructure on the ground, but also our technology going to the moon with the Moon to Mars program, that it's just, I can't think about it too much because it's just too amazing. It's going to be great. I just keep going.
Keep going. Keep going.
That's right.
There's a lot happening, and it's good to see the trajectory of where the space industry is going. What changes would you like to see for Australia in the space industry over the next decade?
Goodness, that's a good question. The changes I would like to see, I'd like to see possibly in the education piece, I'd like to see more STEM and more diversity and more young girls being introduced into the space sector. And I know that we're doing a great job here in Australia, and internationally space is very cognizant of having women in this field that maybe didn't have the opportunity, but I think that's something that we can really lean into and be a leader in that area of diversity across all sort of areas.
Very good. Because if we have good diversity, right, then we've got we can have solutions to problems that we don't necessarily have those solutions to yet, and we can think about overcoming those challenges in the future. What do you think are the biggest challenges for Australia and humanity in space, and how do you think that we might overcome them?
I think some of the challenges for Australia in space, maybe because we're just sort of starting out. I mean, I know we've had a long history of space with our involvement in some of the early NASA missions and things like that. But as a new emerging space industry, I think that's something that we're sort of still getting our head around. So looking forward to that maturing and being able to sort of stand shoulder to shoulder with some of the big players. I think internationally they see Australia as an industry that's fresh and has these innovative ideas because of where we've come from and some of the skills that we have that are not necessarily in space but are applicable in space. So so that's really exciting to see how we can flip some of the things we're good at and flip that up into the space context. So that's great.
It'd be great to see how we can spearhead some new technologies that we're really good at here in Australia.
That's right.
Maybe using some of those technologies, I've got an interesting question for you. How likely do you think it is that we will find life outside of Earth in your lifetime?
My lifetime? Well, I'm going to live to at least 200. So
200%?
So no, I'm going to live till I'm 200.
Oh, very good. Excellent.
And in that
those advances in medical technology.
Well, I know the right people in the space. They can. Yeah. No, I think it's possible. I think my personal opinion is we're here, so why hasn't this happened somewhere else? So yeah, I think that is. I'll be very excited when we announce that. So. When we find it, when our very good experts, hopefully it's an Australian that finds it, hey?
Hopefully. Maybe it might be you.
Oh, no, I will help someone else.
You never know. You're in the Bureau of Meteorology. There might be something interesting happening, something interesting you find from something along a very long distance away.
That's so right. You never know.
You never know. So maybe getting on to maybe some advice for people. What advice do you have for any students listening in that might want a space career?
Right. So I think probably my biggest piece of advice is actually I'll go a step before that. Some people know exactly what they want to do. They've got a really strong focus. I want to be the lead engineer on whatever you want to call, but there are some people that are not sure what they want to do. They have interests across the board. And I suppose my advice probably is to them, because when you know what you want to do, it's pretty easy to plan that out, and that's pretty clear. But when you're not quite sure, it can be a little bit, it's a bit nerve-wracking, because a lot of people ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? And when you don't have a clear answer, it can sometimes feel a bit worrying to yourself. I suppose my advice to those people is, don't worry. You will end up where you need to end up, as long as you focus on the things you enjoy, because generally the subjects you enjoy and the subjects that motivate you to work hard on are the ones you're good at, and that sort of self-perpetuates. So look at what you like, look at what you enjoy, and just sort of continue on that path. Because speaking from experience, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I'm now the space sector lead at the Bureau of Meteorology, which still blows my mind. But take comfort that you will end up in somewhere that you need to, somewhere that you would like to be. You might not know it now, but your future self will thank your younger self for just persisting and studying hard and just carry on. Don't get dissuaded by not knowing exactly what you want to do. So that's my piece of advice. And always make sure you write really well. If you need to just improve your writing skills, that's a general tip for everyone.
So improve writing skills, but it's good to know that if you have some uncertainty with your future, it's not necessarily a cause of concern. Exactly. It's something that's fluid, and you can find your place in space going forward.
Exactly.
And you did touch on what you might have about your younger self. What would you tell your younger self? If you could tell your younger self anything, what would you tell them?
Well, I probably would tell them exactly what I just said before. Don't worry, you'll find your place. I think every experience and every career step you take will contribute to the next one. So I still utilise the skills that I gained at university. I access the skills that I learned under excellent directors and people in a different department. So all of those skills you will use, so it's not a waste. So Zandria, keep on going is what I'd say to myself. Don't worry.
That's some good self-motivation. Keep on going. And that would be my words to everyone out there listening today. Keep on going. Just keep going.
Yeah.
You know? Find out what you're passionate about and pursue it, just like Zandria has.
That's right.
So Zandria, how might Australia's role in space change by the year 2050? Now, that's a tricky question.
That is a tricky question. I think we're going to be less watching and learning and trying to sort of bring ourselves together, and I think we'll be leading. We will show how strong we've come as a country, and we will showcase the skills that we've got in a number of different areas. And so people will be looking to Australia to lead on some of those aspects.
All right, and by showcasing those skills, what areas of the space industry do you think will see the most change or growth? And what areas do you think might need more focus or greater focus?
Goodness me. I think aligning, my personal opinion, aligning some of the science and academic with our industry partners, sort of having that connection there is really important. We do it well, but we can always increase that. For space weather, I would really love to see much more understanding and awareness of space weather impacts across Australia, and from that becoming a more resilient and secure Australia in terms of a space weather impact. So my personal opinion there, yeah, so that's what I would like to see.
If we were to find life outside of Earth in our lifetime, how do you think we might detect it? What do you think might be the most likely way that we might find that?
Oh my goodness, Christian.
Sorry to ask you all a
interesting
difficult question.
And this is a skill that if you're coming up, you don't need to know everything. And if you don't know the answer, it's quite okay to say, I don't know. But I think it will be a sample of, we will take a sample perhaps on Mars, one of the rovers up there take a sample, and we may be able to see some single cell kind of thing. But you know what, I'm not an astrobiologist. And so I do not know the answer. I'd be interested to know if people have their own opinions on that thing and that aspect of life in the solar system, in the universe.
Okay. Well, we do have some questions here. And my first question that we have from an anonymous guest is, what space weather is there? Such as solar flares, what else do we have? What kind of space weather do we have?
So space weather is the effect of the sun and this guy here, you can see in my picture. So the sun, which is a big star, is a big ball of hot gas, and it emits plasma and particles and things like that. And that interaction with the Earth is what we call space weather. So there are solar flares, coronal mass ejections, which are big eruptions of plasma. And if they're headed towards Earth, they can disrupt our technological systems. So spacecraft, and things that are in that near space environment, but it can also have impacts on the ground. So it can impact power lines and electricity transmission. It can also have impact on in aviation, in high frequency propagation. So communication using HF radio can be impacted. So there's a number of different impacts of space weather, which is the sun having a lot of fun throwing stuff at Earth. So yeah, does that help? It's very simplified, and I'm not a physicist, so just to be clear.
Oh, good to know. So it's mostly to do with the sun and how much activity is happening. How much fun is the sun having? How much fun?
The sun's having a lot of fun, and as it's going to have a lot more fun.
Exactly. I have another question for you. Do you think the Australian Space Agency will train and send people into space? Do you think we might have future astronauts from Australia in space, launching from Australia?
Oh, well, I can't speak for the Australian Space Agency, but I think there should be an Australian astronaut. I've heard some people say it's inevitable, but I don't know who will be sending them up. But yes, why not?
That'll be exciting.
It will be exciting.
Get that. I've got a question from Sienna, and her question, or their question, is, what is the weather like on the moon? Is it warmer or cooler than us?
Well, it's hard to say if it's weather per se as we think about it, but it's cold. Very cold. Space is cold, despite having a very large star, the sun. Space in itself is very cold.
All right, it is very cold indeed. It doesn't have an atmosphere like Earth down here.
That's right. Take a jumper for the astronaut that goes to space. Take a jumper.
I have a question, and it's okay because we discussed earlier, it's okay if we don't have the answer to them, but how many rovers or man-made objects do you think are in space right now?
Well, I think that there'd be quite a lot, because I think I won't probably give you a number, but if you think about all the satellites, all the small CubeSats that people are going up, our friend Elon Musk at SpaceX throwing up lots. So if you think about that, all of those whizzing around the Earth, then on Mars we've got at least 3 or 4, or not we, but the space community has a number of rovers. Curiosity, they've got a helicopter just on Mars. Then there are other satellites that are looking at the sun. There's some going out like Voyager 2, lots, I can't think, thousands, at least 2,000. That's a very
At
big
least
guess.
2,000.
I don't know.
I think
If someone would like to
that's a good starting
check.
And you guys at home, as an extra project, maybe you can find out just how many things are in space. Now you mentioned a CubeSat. What is a CubeSat? Could you describe a CubeSat to us?
A CubeSat is a satellite that's the size of a cube, a loaf of bread size. They are often used. Australia has got quite a big CubeSat community, and a lot of our we've got quite a lot of skill in preparing CubeSats, and they are small, a little bit more cost effective, and I don't want to say cheap because, you know, it's space, but they go up and they can do all manner of satellite things up in space, usually in low Earth orbit.
Okay, that's a great response. That's a great answer. I've got an answer here by another anonymous guest. It's, can geologists get a job in the space agency or maybe in the space industry, such as studying rocks from other planets?
Well, as I said, I'm not sure about the space agency, but geologists are there are a number of geologists in the space industry. There is a term called in situ resource utilisation, which is IRSU, and that talks about utilising the minerals and the rocks and things on a planet, say if you go to Mars or to the moon, and you dig those up and you use that, you utilise the minerals to create something else or what have you. But geologists and their knowledge of the way the Earth is formed can be translated to learning about how Mars was formed or how the Moon was formed and how to use and utilise those resources and minerals on other planets. So yes, geologists in space are more than welcome. And I personally wanted to be, I also really like geology. I'm encouraging my kids to be geologists. Love rocks and minerals.
There we go. And maybe on that, maybe we might have some more investigations of our soils on Mars. And I've got another question by, and I'm going to maybe butcher this name. It's Bree-ya-ya-ya-ya. Bree-ya-ya-ya. And it's like, is it true that Mars has water?
It has had water, and I think there's frozen water. I think they call it ice, right? On Mars, I believe so. Yes, there is water, and on other planets as well.
And on other planets as well. There we go. Very good. Would you hazard a guess at what those other planets might be?
Maybe someone in the chat knows. Flip it back. There's been a for a project for some of the or if anyone wants to do more, there's been a number of there's been a few NASA satellites and probes that go out, and there's a planet that has it's covered in ice, and it holds underneath it an ocean, and they're still investigating it. So if anyone wants to go look that one up. Bit of homework.
Bit of homework. Now, maybe for the last few minutes, just getting to a few more maybe down to earth personal questions.
Sure.
One of them was it scary not knowing what you wanted to do when you wanted to pursue your career? Yeah,
it was. I think, I was a bit concerned. Because I liked everything. That was my problem. I liked so many different things. And when I was at school many years ago, there was a bit of a push for you needed to know what you wanted to do, and you had to stick to that career path, and that's what you were and that's what you were going to be. I think nowadays there's a lot more acknowledgement that you don't need to know, and careers change and they meander through. So yeah, at the time it was scary that I didn't know what to do, but I just stuck with things long enough to learn and then sort of followed the opportunity. So yeah, but hopefully you guys now that are in that similar position don't feel it's too scary, because good things can come out of being learning lots of different things.
Very good. And another personal question for you is that you mentioned that you had a cat. Would you like to share what your cat's name might be?
I would like to,
but we'd love to know if you like sharing.
My cat's name is Julius, and
Julius.
Yes. We adopted him from the RSPCA, and he is a very large tuxedo cat. you wouldn't see from that photo, but we call him a dog cat because he does like to chase balls. And yeah, Julius.
Very, very cute. And then maybe bringing it back full circle is just maybe for some of the last questions. We've got about 5 minutes left, everyone. So if you feel like any last questions, please ask them. But we've got one question just going back to space weather, and it's by Somerset Primary School or public school. And it's what is space weather and what does it involve?
So as I mentioned earlier, so we have the sun, and the Earth gets impacted by the sun. So the sun's that big hot ball of gas, and it throws out matter, and that matter has electrons and protons, and that can impact the Earth. We're protected a lot of the time by our magnetosphere, and sometimes those expulsions of matter and plasma can sort of bounce off the magnetosphere, and sometimes that creates some effects inside Earth. So it is something to be aware of, but it's not scary. We just need to know how it might disrupt our GPS, or if our Uber Eats will not arrive at the correct location, things like that.
Sometimes it's good to know the technicalities why some of these, functions are. How do we get our Uber Eats deliveries? Why, where do we get our GPS from?
Space.
Exactly. How are we protected from radiation? And it's good to know that those are good responses too. There we go. Let's just have a look at some more questions for you, because we've got a few more minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to volunteer, Zandria?
Maybe if you haven't already, come and see the Australian Space Discovery Centre. It's a great, I'm doing a plug for you, Christian.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great centre.
I love it.
It covers a number of different aspects of space, and you can see the differences in space. It also looks at, as I mentioned, I'm from the Bureau of Meteorology and I do space weather, but there's a whole group in the Bureau that use Earth observation data, so satellite data that looks at the Earth to help us predict our weather. So that's a really important and a valuable Earth product that the Bureau is involved with, which is a key space output. So we use Earth observation data to help predict the weather, so you know whether to pack a jumper. So yeah, and you can learn about that at the Space Discovery Centre, and there's a nice mural of space weather as well. So there you go.
Do have many, many good things to experience here at the Australian Space Discovery Centre. Good presentations, Q&A sessions like this, workshops, all sorts of things that you can look out for. But what about if they want to learn more about meteorology? Is there some place that you'd recommend that we can learn more about meteorology?
Well, yeah, the Bureau of Meteorology has a website, and within that website you can actually access some live streams from satellites, from the data from some of our international partners. I will say this slowly. Himawari 8 is a Japanese meteorological satellite, and it looks at the Earth and produces these really amazing images of Australia. And if you go onto the website, the Bureau website, which is bureau.gov.au, you can see some wonderful images from Himawari satellite data. And when you get old, or depending on where you are in your learning timeline, there is opportunities to be meteorological. They do a graduate program. There's opportunities to learn about meteorology through that and get formal qualifications. And yes, there's lots of places to learn about weather.
There we go. Thank you so much for that, Zandria. We might go to our closing now. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us and listening to our space guest, Zandria. And thank you so much to Zandria for sharing your story with us. It's been really fantastic. We loved having you. If you'd like to learn more about space in Australia or to become a space expert, please come and visit us at the Australian Space Discovery Centre, or look on the Bureau of Meteorology's website and look for Himawari, so we could do some things like that. So thank you so much, Zandria, we loved having you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for watching, everybody.